Think you found a winning sports betting strategy? Think again, because these 7 common tactics might seem smart, but they're actually designed to exploit cognitive biases in the way that you think, whilst emptying your wallet. 86% of gamblers fall for at least one of them. Now, I'll show you why that is, why you should avoid them at all costs, and what really works. More on that in a moment, but now let's get started with a betting strategy that's been fooling people for over 200 years. Now, even if you've never heard of its formal name, this system may well be something that you've thought of trying, but trust me, don't bother. You can apply it to many different betting mediums, but it was invented as a double or nothing strategy for betting on 50-50 outcomes. Now, that could be sport, it could be a coin flip, or it could be red or black in roulette. And of course, 50-50s don't actually exist once the casino or bookies have snuck in their edge. For example, your chances of winning on red are actually 18 out of 37 on a European roulette wheel because of that green zero, so it's less than 50-50. Just like sportsbook odds on bets like both teams to score in football. Now, they offer even worse value a lot of the time, but let's just assume that life is fair for a second and give this strategy a chance, because actually it does sound clever. The idea is that if you bet and lose, you just keep doubling your bet, and eventually you'll come out on top because you win. Simple. Except it's a trap based only on optimism bias, an irrational belief experienced by 80% of the global population that bad things won't happen to them. But if you follow this strategy, the Martingale system, which dates back to the 18th century in France, bad things will happen to you because it's doomed to failure. The clue's actually hidden in the name. I'll explain why in a bit, but here's how it works, or rather how it doesn't work. Imagine you start with a £1 bet. If you lose, you double up to £2 on the next bet, then £4, £8, and eventually £16. After 5 consecutive losses, you'd then be placing a £32 bet just to try and cover your previous losses and bank a profit equal to your original stake only of just £1, because with Martingale, your original stake is all you'll ever win. Now, that's a terrible return, but the real trouble comes when you experience a streak of negative variance, meaning you keep on losing, because there will always come a time when you can't afford to keep playing. If you head to a sportsbook with a £1,000 bankroll, start with a £1 bet and lose not 5 but 10 times in a row, you'd need to stake £1,024 in order to win just £1. But of course you haven't got that balance. Oops. Now imagine you're betting on 5-to-1 outcomes and not 1-to-1 outcomes, and those numbers start to get really scary really fast. It's a strategy which just doesn't add up. And why the name Martingale? It came from a regional French expression meaning to play in an absurd and incomprehensible way. It's a one-way ticket to the nearest ATM, just like the next crazy betting strategy that you really need to avoid, because a fallacy is a mistaken belief arising from a glitch in the way that we think, like believing that past betting results influence future betting outcomes. Take that 50-50 outcome once again. If you lose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row, you increasingly get to thinking luck owes me. Now, sports betting pundits don't help this either. How many times have you heard one say that a team is due a win? Sadly, these things are simply not true. No team is ever really due a win, and the luck owes you absolutely nothing. Let's say that you like betting heads for a coin toss, but unfortunately it lands tails 5 times in a row. The chances of it landing on heads now are still 50-50 because each event is totally independent, and what happened before is gone. The trouble is that even for the more experienced sports bettors, that sometimes feels hard to believe. It's known as gambler's fallacy. At some point, that coin has to land on tails, right? Or that team on a losing streak has to win. And at some point, it will do. Probably. But no, it doesn't have to. It all stems from what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, that feeling of unease we get from holding 2 conflicting beliefs. We know sport is unpredictable, but feel a certain outcome is overdue. So we convince ourselves that it's rational to count on it actually happening. Now, number 3 on the list of these 7 sports betting strategies to avoid is one of the simplest you could possibly find. So wouldn't it be great if it worked? Except it doesn't. The idea is that by wagering the exact same amount on every single bet, regardless of the odds, risk or value of the opportunity, you keep your emotions in check, because gut feelings, hunches and all such guff should be kept well out of your betting decisions, and thus manage your losses in a sensible way. It's an approach known as flat betting, and whilst it sounds good and can be a way to lose in a slow manner, a more controlled manner, it's not a way to win. And why is that? Because flat betting treats all bets as equal, and in reality they're just not. It exploits the risk aversion, which stops some gamblers from losing big without offering any rewards. With variable betting, you adjust your stake based on the quality of each opportunity. So if you're betting on an in-form Manchester City to get past an out-of-form Burnley in a one-off cup match, your stake would be larger. Whereas if for some reason you thought Burnley might just nick it, your stake should be smaller. Over time, you would expect most of such larger, lower odds bets to win, and most of such smaller, higher odds bets to lose. There are, though, of course, no guarantees, and what really matters is finding value bets where the odds are higher than their true probability of the outcome. There's more on that at the end of this video, but the short, sharp truth about flat betting is that it will leave you feeling just that. But I'm not suggesting that strategy number 4 on the list is any better. It stems from something called outcome bias, where if something has happened before, predicting that it will happen again feels like it's inherently a good decision, no matter what the value prediction actually offers. And it doesn't seem like a sensible option, because what we're talking about here is betting on the favourite, because they're the favourite for a reason, right? Well, unfortunately, that reason is that actually someone has to be the favourite, not necessarily that they actually have to win. For example, across the UK flat, jumps and all-weather horse racing, only around 35% of outright horse racing favourites win their races. So 2/3 of the time, the bet would lose. And when you win, the odds must be better than 3-1 or 4.0 in decimal odds on average for you to actually turn a profit. And of course, the bookies won't let that happen. What is the average starting price of the favourite in a horse race? It's actually about 2-1, and that's been steadily dropping for decades. It's a strategy which makes zero sense, and the bookies know we love backing favourites. So they offer competitive prices with smaller margins to encourage more of us to do so, knowing that over time they will always come out on top. It's just another reason why last year UK bookies made 15 billion. They cynically exploit the way that we think just so that they can take our money, and the way they do so gets even more ugly and shocking with numbers 5, 6 and 7 on this list. Meanwhile, if you're getting value from these tips and want to get more, don't forget to smash the subscribe button. There are more strategy uploads coming soon. Now, number 5 on the list is a horse racing betting strategy, because a handicap is a race where each horse carries a different weight according to its ability, in order to even things out and make things more competitive and more entertaining. Now, horses which have performed better or won more races carry a heavier weight, but if you can find one carrying less weight than it should, then in theory you've got yourself a value bet. It's a strategy known as beating the weights. Now, the opportunity arises when a horse performs well and you're able to bet on their next race before its handicap weight has to be adjusted, which can often take several days. It all seems ridiculously easy, but of course it isn't. Sadly, the bookmakers know all too well about this tactic and simply shorten that horse's odds, maintaining their edge and their margin and killing any value advantage the bettor thinks that they've achieved. It all stems from a simple phenomenon known as confirmation bias, where we choose to believe that past events dictate future events without examining why that might not happen. It can easily give bettors an unjustified feeling of confidence, which is why it's such a dangerous strategy. Not half as dangerous though as strategy 6 and 7. This next approach is driven by a common cognitive bias known as loss aversion, where the emotional impact of a loss is felt more intensely than the joy of an equivalent gain. In other words, losing £100 feels much more painful than winning £100 feels good. And what do we want to do with the pain, or indeed debt? We want to make it go away as fast as possible and get back on an even kill. But whilst the desire to be back in the positive is completely rational, doing so just by throwing more money at the problem clearly isn't. Yet it's a trap that all bar the most disciplined gamblers have been guilty of stumbling into at some point, chasing losses. It is, in fact, almost exactly what not to do, because the bet made in haste is the bet that's most likely to fail, so your losses grow. You chase more and then the problem just mushrooms, and soon you're on the tilt, in a state of mental or emotional confusion and frustration, leading to a cycle of impulsive betting and empty bankroll. So if gambling puts you in the red, there's only one way to slowly but surely get you back in the black, and I'll link to that at the end of this video, in contrast to the worst, most destructive strategy for getting back on your feet, which comes with the final entry on this list. The final strategy on the list plays on a psychological phenomenon known as the illusion of control, where you feel like you are close to mastering your bets, so you increase your confidence to continue. It taps into your brain's reward anticipation mechanisms, releasing the same feel-good dopamine you get when you actually triumph. It's all there just to let you know that something feels good. It's a dangerous double whammy, kidding you that you've just come close to a big win. Close, but no cigar. So the real deal is just around the corner, obviously. For example, it's Saturday and you've just laid down a multi-leg accumulator on half a dozen Premier League matches. You correctly predict the result of the early kickoff, then you get 4 out of the 4 right from the main game. So it all comes down to the late kickoff, and as you head into injury time, it's looking good, and you've decided not to cash out. But then when the wrong team scores with the last kick of the game, you're gutted. But this is a near miss fallacy. So you're all feeling amazing, and next time that it's going to happen, so it's time to go large. Don't do it, because the next time is a completely standalone event. With all these strategies, you may get lucky in the short term, but in the long run, the bookies make sure it will not work. Unlike using smart maths with a strategy, which is the only reliable way to beat sports betting books. And that's coming up next in this video here on the end screen, so check it out.